I think that's what I want. I don't know. This is my first time having the chaos community persona. I've led enough meetings, but had never logged in for myself. But yeah, that's what I'm starting to work on. We were working on this with our product security last year, and then they deprioritized the effort, and I was like, okay, do you? And then like a couple weeks ago, they're like, hey, we have this new great idea, and I was like, yeah, yeah, I know. We did this. We've already had these I'm like, we've already been through this. I agree. Um,
We have a team that's looking at that more closely, and I have like consultations with them. Um, I wish they would publish their findings more. I might poke them on that because
yeah, this would
they're
be a really great place to do that, and would be very happy to collaborate on that type of. I mean, that's what I'm hoping to be able to do as things move forward, hopefully, with the product security side for Red Hat. Is that which is kind of been the same approach that we've had within our team. The whole like is we upstream everything we can and then cut it off where it is like internal like decision if it starts to point towards any like actual internal decision making and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, has Google tried to replace analysis and everything with AI yet? Right, you might not want to put that on a recording, so that's probably you could say no comment.
Uh, no, it's more like a combo.
Yeah.
Like what can I do? What can I be helped by? But it turns out a lot of my work is still working with like incredibly messy data and unstructured data, of which AI does not do very well with. Because it doesn't like
No.
know what it is. It doesn't have enough context and to like spend the time to make it have context, then I've done all the work already. Like I
Yeah.
went through and like added 200 labels to open-ended questions. And then it was like, okay, now I could summarize it. And it's like, yeah, I did all the work.
Yeah,
So,
I could have just done this myself. Yeah, I think that's as like a whole, I'm going to be very curious to see where like data science and more like um like and pretty much just like strategic analysis like and where you're actually you're using data to like inform decisions or inform a perspective on a situation, whether that be open source or otherwise. I'll be very curious to see where this goes in the I don't even know what long term means anymore because everything changes like
yeah,
every two
so
weeks. But let's
fast.
say in 2 years, because realistically at this point, AI doesn't do this very well, but everyone assumes that it does because it's data and like AI does the data thing. And so it's the amount of times that I'm sitting here and I'm like, I mean, sure, you can have an AI do that. Um, it doesn't mean it will be good, useful, or I mean, you can. That's
No.
a choice you can
I
make,
I will
but
say it has helped with like just the efficiency of writing scripts, which is that's what it's good
oh
at.
my
So
God,
it's
it's
like
so good.
fix this query for me. Great. And now like so I think in that ways it has made things faster, but I'm
100%.
like it's not doing anything strategic. It's just it's doing the monkey work, which is like, can you fix this function because I don't know why I'm getting an error. Great, thanks.
Yes. Yeah, I that is probably I talk about that a lot. Like, the biggest thing I use AI for is being like, okay, can you make a query do exactly this? And it's like, is this the most efficient? I hit it with the, is this the most efficient option? On repeat, and then it's like, here's the considerations. I'm like, thank you. This would have taken me 30 minutes like 2 years ago, which
Yep.
so that's a side of it I completely agree. But like the amount of times where it's like, oh, OpenClaw will like be able to scrape the internet and tell us what to do, and I'm like. Okay, I guess I have to
Wait,
address this.
I wanna tell you one silly one. And I guess I could say this on the record. It's not revealing anything surprising at Google. We clearly have internal tools that build on our internal data sets that could never be externalized, but then it has the
Yeah.
ability to run models on our own stuff. And I asked it a question and it literally summarized my own document. And I was like, I was looking for other sources. Like,
I guess
but
I'm
like
just the only person who has the intelligence.
so that was like a funny moment where we're supposed to like give them feedback, and I was like, asking a question, getting your own data back. It's like,
Um,
okay.
But yeah, since we only have like one or two discussion points, actually, I think it's a good time to we can just kind of say like what's been going on in this working group because it actually has changed a decent like this is probably a pretty different like makeup what we're working on and stuff is pretty different than when you were last here. Um, and so Dawn, I'm assuming like Dawn's out for like 2 months. I'm so happy for her. I'm so happy she's not here dealing with all this stuff, even though I don't want to be
Yeah.
dealing with the overarching things in chaos right now. But um, so Dawn is no longer the head of like the data science role that she was in, but she's still, and so she has stepped down as a working group lead for this, but as when she's off leave, will be still involved in like the working group. So it's myself and Sal are the working group leads. Have
Okay.
you met Sal before? Or because I don't know
I
if
have.
y'all's time. Okay, I was like, I didn't remember where the timelines crossed over or not.
I've
Um,
met Sal in other contexts. So not
okay,
actually in
yeah.
this working group, but we've had interactions before.
Nice. So yeah, Sal is the other working group lead. And I would say like the main things that are going on in this working group at the exact moment is one, we've been like I we've archived like Rappel, which was like the open research that was under like Aspen, and moved everything over to here. So then
Okay.
people can be working on building like kind of the visualizations that would go into 8 knot that a lot of times are based off of the chaos metrics models. So actually taking a lot of the metric models that are more have stayed in a conceptual and bring them to life. And so those are we have all of the notebooks that are created for that. And so they're all based off of I've been using data collection tool as my neutral term for like while we're in this in between period between Augur and what will eventually come after. But so we'll connect to the data collection tool that's run by CHAOSS, and so people can build those visualizations here, and then we would integrate them into 8 knot as well. So that's some of the work that's being
Okay.
done right now. I can let Ernest talk about the foundation stats work.
All right, thank you, Kali. When I joined the working group, I think that should be just before, after you left, you went on the holiday. So I started working with Sal to understand, currently the way foundations report metadata are very, very different. What do I mean? CNCF, Apache, and Eclipse, they record metadata structures in different ways, and it makes it impossible for researchers or community managers to answer sustainability questions on a cross-foundational level. So what we are trying to do with the foundational stars project is to get the metadata together and normalize them so that we could do research that could give us insights on a cross-foundational level. That is, how does the way CNCF reports their maybe documentation, how does it impact some sustainability metrics as compared to Apache and any other foundations? So we've made some trials to try to automate the work with some AI crawlers, but we were not able to validate most of our work. So we had to revert to doing things manually, we've been in that phase for a while right now. And we're trying to find a way to scale that through. So the Apache data collection is still ongoing, but I believe that we are putting systems in place to make things to attract more collaborators. But one thing we notice is the issue we opened on the data science working group is attracting contributors, but most of those contributors they don't come back. Yeah, so those are the stages that we are. I'm currently thinking of how to, you know, bring them coming back. I'm going to discuss that maybe later today. Then we could probably share opinions on how that could be solved or not. So that's pretty much it. And we're happy to have you back.
Thanks for that. I'm
Yeah.
curious if you where I could catch up on it. So should I go to the repo to see more about this project?
Yes, you can. Then
Okay.
we could, catch up on Slack afterwards.
Okay. I have to warn you, my Slack is like mildly inaccessible at the moment. As in,
Oh,
like, I can get in, but like I can't stay logged in. And that's a
Interesting.
problem of my court machine. And I'm not a big fan of using two laptops at work right now. So I'm trying to fix that, but I like try to go into Slack like at least a few times a week, so I'm not like letting things go. But if I'm slow to respond, it's because I forgot to log in this week. But basically,
Uh,
like, yeah, it's something is going on with our network, and it has an override for Slack at the moment, and so I can only log in incognito, so I can't stay logged in.
yeah, we
This
could
is a
Interesting.
use
personal
the
problem.
we could use
Hmm?
GitHub issues, commenting on GitHub issues. I'm always very responsive, unless if I
Okay.
see the message does not require urgent response. But I'm always very responsive on GitHub issues as well. Then we could see how we go from there.
Yeah, there is
Thank you. Yeah,
actually.
thanks for sharing.
I don't know if it's going to be helpful or more confusing, but there's a PR that's open right now that is like kind of bringing all of the sources for this project together and bringing it under like a name, and so it might be a good point to like where everything is at, what the definition of the project is, because I think that's him to kind of formalize it a bit more. And I think there is like a kind of a more broad discussion, I guess, for I'm really liking how the data science working group is like shaping up to be, but like, okay, there's gonna be constantly like sub projects under this coming in and out. How should we structure this? How do we structure the repository so it makes sense to people to go into different areas? Which like I said, I'm really happy that this is how it's turning out to be. But how do we handle that? Because I can see that there is now like a new data set that is around that's really interesting around like corporate investment or involvement in open source, and like I could see an entire project coming out around that, and like if we're talking about like upstream security threat, I see that to be the life cycle of this group is different research areas coming in and out, and so how do we want to do that?
It's an open question. I'm curious too. I
Yeah.
think we'll just figure it out as we
Mhm.
grow arms.
Yes. So yeah, that's what's been that has been I guess like really what's been going on since I guess there's been a lot of practitioner guides kind of coming in and out. I'm hoping to work with Dawn on some practitioner guide on usage and adoption. That's still kind of an open question. So then we don't just tell people, no, please don't use downloads. Downloads are misleading, but a way to be like, don't do that. But here are some ways of going about doing this to get this information. Had a very funny conversation in my own like at work context where somebody was like, "Oh my gosh, stars are misleading. What are we gonna do?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, that's nothing actually. That's we knew that." Which was very funny to me. I don't know if the person who was brought it up appreciated. I was just like, yeah, this is the same as before, same as after. This is not surprising. But it kind of leads to like usage and like stars, downloads, these metrics that people really like to look at that don't mean a whole lot. I don't think it's sticking to people that those are bad because we don't have anything to tell them to do differently. And so I still find that to be very important, but I need a absolute dumpster fire disaster to stop happening like every 2 to 3 weeks in my professional life, and then we can do that. So, but yeah, with some of the other stuff, we're also talking about trying to get I guess I could just use Augur for now as the name of like a Docker image of Augur. So then, people who are coming in who want to work on visualizations, want to work on like 8 knot would be in a different context, but starting to develop out any models or research on a smaller data set that is available to them. So it is something that people can use as like a sandbox environment if they don't want to, set up an entire database on their own computer and go through all that effort. I want to try to get that barrier of entry of doing analysis work as low as possible. Because I do think that's like how do we get retain contributors, and like that is my point of view on it. I saw someone added that. My point of view is how do we make the barrier to entry as low as possible, and I think that's something that the foundation stats portion of the project is a pretty good like entryway point to that, and that's what I'm hoping to have for like the like eight whatever however you want to call it the visualization side of it, but I see that like expanding more to like okay when we're developing I'm hoping to work on like security modeling of flagging like upstream risks like my hope would be that is something that somebody could work on with this solution. It might not be the most mature option and like provide the best results, but it has the bare bones of all the different data types in there, so you can start working on prototypes and stuff like that.
I mean, I love that. I think the hardest part of our job is always getting the data. And so like
Yeah.
you can't do anything without it. And if we have either like existing data sets or easy ways to get people access to it, like I mean, I would love that personally.
That
I'm working on
is
a proof of concept right now using my own GitHub personal token and it's terrible. Like
oh, I'm so
no one
excited
should
for
have to do
you.
this.
Wait, oh, Augur became like, and this is why this is all the things that are going on is so frustrating. The barrier of entry to like getting Augur set up and using it is pretty much it's a whole different world than the last time you since you went on leave, which is really
Okay.
exciting. Yeah, the like, but also that is a part of the. I'll actually probably let Adrian talk about this because this is more on like Adrian's side. Also, yeah, I don't know if have you met Adrian or Kaio or these they're both on my team now.
They were
So
just joining when I
they're
was about to leave. So like I think
yes.
we've met in passing, so I don't really know them.
Yeah, so we can probably do some introductions, but that's part of it. And there's well as there's some different data sources that people have just like donated to the working group, which are really interesting. And they're like, we don't know what to do with this, but here you go. And we're like, cool, great, sounds awesome to me. Can you just like, the only problem is I don't think people are giving enough context of like, how did you get this data? Where is this data coming from? How is it like the a little bit more context so something can be done with it, but still like we're moving along. But yeah, I'll let Adrian kind of you can do an introduction and talk about where the like how do we get a access point to a bare metals uh or bare bones auger data. We can't hear you.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's now we can kind of hear you, but it's very low.
Does it work now?
It's like you're whispering.
How about now?
There we go.
Cool. Jank setups while working remotely. Um, Hi, I'm Adrian. I joined Red Hat last summer. And I've been basically maintaining the Docker code base basically that since then. Um, been doing a lot of just general improvements and things. Currently working through events that are happening, but definitely going to be continuing to work on kind of improving data collection and things. I think I mentioned in the last week's meeting or last data 2 weeks ago um, about trying to get kind of ways to get the community access to like just a quick like a data set or instance that you can that could just be kind of spun up. You don't have to worry about like running your own Augur or collecting your own data. And so I think in the notes I pointed to a empty. I think I had previously made a Docker container that just contains an empty database. Um, oh no, that's for 8.0. Is that still relevant? Did you think that's relevant,
I
Kelly?
mean, I don't think an empty database is. We just
Yeah.
needed like, or a database with a couple of repositories that have been collected on is like what is. I feel like it's the kind of pretty much what you get if you just start up Augur out of the box.
Yeah, so that's something I do plan to get set up, hopefully along with most of the other stuff that will hopefully get out soon, but we'll see how much I have time for. But yeah, that's definitely I do want to kind of get those, like get a data set of just like basic collected data so that analysis, like people making analysis and things from that can at least kind of practice and see what it's like to query the query the data schema.
Yeah, so Kali and Adrian, so it's practically impossible to even work on 8 knot issues right now. Am I correct? Because we don't have a sample of our
You'd have to
database.
Yeah, you'd have to set up Augur as well, which is definitely a lot less than what it used to be, but you just have to like run the Docker container for then it would populate because once you just start up Augur, it populates with a couple of different repositories, and then that's what you would need to work on 8 knot. But I think it's probably worth a discussion of seeing what like 'cause yeah, I know Adrian, there's a lot of different stuff on the plate, but seeing if how of how we can probably like see if we can try to prioritize getting um small data like that solution handled, especially with I'm not these recordings don't come out quickly enough, slash I don't really care. We're planning on donating 8 knot formally to Chaos. And so it would be great to have something like that with the donation so that if people want to start contributing, stuff like that, then the barrier of entry is lower. But time is difficult to the exact moment whenever there's so much stuff going on.
Yeah, and I think actually one of my plans in terms of the data collection tooling is like it's always been to kind of implement more testing and more sort of automatic, like, hey, let's make sure that if someone's contributing to it, that the changes actually work. And one of the things I think I see a really neat overlap between if I can kind of maybe not the initial runs, but in future, like get a sort of automatic process running that would basically run through a small subset of repos and fully collect them and like keep a Docker image up to date with that data so that like we're talking about to provide that for people working on that. Um, that would also be really helpful for the data collection tooling and the testing of that so that we can basically say, hey, okay, after a full collection has run, let's like do some database queries and make sure that the data we expect to be there is actually there. Uh, so I think in the future that's going to become very much part of the sort of testing system. And the neat side effect is there's going to be an up-to-date container with at least some sample data in it for people to play around with.
Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that. I'm
Um,
ready to test it when you're there.
yeah. I was the one that added the question of how do you retain contributors, although I'm not talking broadly. I'm not talking based on the issues that I think we are facing on the foundational staff project. So I think I read a couple of papers. I can't remember the particular paper, maybe a couple of months ago. Or I saw a project from Chaos that said there is a problem of non-code contributors. It gets difficult for people to know what they've done in those communities. And one of those ways to appreciate non-code contributors is to give them maybe a badge or a weekly or any kind of periodic appreciation on socials. Maybe that could be some sort of reward system for them. Then, while I was critically thinking about how do we, because for me, I don't have the luxury of time to be doing the manual collection myself, even though I wish I could. But I'm happy to see a lot of people do that, and let's just do things in parallel and see how we could go that far. So the question of how do I really sustain a couple of people that have come to that repo and contributed, then I thought of this. I wanted to discuss with everyone to peruse that and see if we could try that out. I'm happy to design a program more formally.
My personal, I guess, perspective of this is that making I guess like putting towards efforts of like how do we make data sources accessible? Like how do we have like projects for people to work on? That's where I guess that's where I would think the efforts around how do we attract and retain contributors. It's how do we have meaningful work for people to be able to do? Because a lot of times we do have a lot of people who comment on in the data science working group in different contexts of like looking for yeah, looking to do data science work. And so I guess my personal perspective is like instead of we only have like a very small set of people, instead of trying to put time towards like a badging effort, maybe putting time towards like trying, maybe like we can figure out how to help Adrian like get the data set together for then people can start to contribute more to this data set or to the data science working group in 8 knot, or how do we get the foundation stats in a situation of like how do you use the foundation stats, or like how what type of research do you want to do. So that might not be the answer you're looking for, but that's just my, I guess, my personal perspective on it of like where I would want like time investment within like this group to go.
Yeah, those sounds good on a broader sense. And I don't know if there are other. Okay, Sophia.
I'm just kind of curious because I have been out of the loop for a bit, but just in terms of the folks that have come in and out of the group, what kind of backgrounds do they have? Because I guess the hard part about like getting them involved in a project is sort of like knowing that everyone's experience level is all over the place in terms of what they've done already and what they would want to take on. And I feel like there is a high barrier to entry for something like data science, especially if it is the data access point, and then it's learning the tools to interact with it, and then it's doing the analysis on top of it, and then is making sense of it. Like there's many layers where I'm curious what people are what back if we have a sense of what skill sets people have when they're coming into the group, and that could help maybe tailor more of an experience that could keep them involved or get them involved early. I'm not really sure what that is, so I don't know how to advise without knowing the folks that have been showing up.
I think I have my starting point. I will try to know them because I also don't know them, especially for those that have been contributing to foundational stats. I just see them on GitHub, they just send their pull request, and that's it. I think that should be the first starting point for me. I will try to care to know them because what you say right now, I've tried to remember what made me like still contributing to chaos is because it aligns perfectly with my research interests. You know, I found the project and I just stuck with it. Yeah, so I will try to know them better from this coming week. Maybe I could get them to start coming to this meeting. Then from there, we could fix the other, infrastructures around how to give them work in terms of projects that aligns with their interests. Um, so, Adrian, if I could ask, can others hear me, please?
Sorry, say that again?
I said, if I may ask, do you have a timeline for the sample Augur Docker that you said you have on your radar?
Uh, Not, I think my main focus right now is trying to get a repository out there for the kind of Augur community to continue contributing under CHAOSS. But I think I am gonna probably want to do that, get sample data either alongside that or soon after. Um, is my hope. So
Okay, okay. Thank you.
I would think so like the next couple of weeks, do you think is a fair like assessment?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just being reasonable. Like, our team is so deeply impacted by the move by Augur that pretty much anything in every context that we said that we were going to do before that has happened has dramatically shifted. I'm hoping that time is coming to a close soon. But like we're pretty upfront that that's been unfortunately a huge time, like where almost all of our time has had to go when it comes to our upstream involvement over the last month.
I have a random question
Yeah.
if we're in that time of the meeting. Um, I have started to also pop in a bit on the package metadata working group.
Okay.
I'm curious if you see any alignment between the things that they're working on, because I know, at least from Andrew's perspective, like I know he's done a lot of work to create data sets. Granted, his are very focused on package managers. Um, but there could be some alignment between the groups. I don't want to pose it yet because I want to get better understand what they're working on and how it potentially could support this group. But I'm kind of thinking about that as sort of the long tail support. If that group is working on making data sets more accessible for package metadata, then that's also potentially something that we could point to as part of this working group as a sample to start with. Right now, they're very much focused on like metadata alignment and trying to essentially improve how package managers expose this information. So it's sort of like fix the underlying infrastructure. I don't know how much influence they'll have, but it's still an interesting prospect of trying to create alignment across, I don't know, hundreds of package managers. And so like solving some of that data integration challenge that we face within any data science project. So I just wanted to float that I am sitting in on those calls now. I won't bring anything to the meeting unless it's, I think, relevant to this group, but I was curious if you, Callie, or others in the group have already been in touch with that group, or if you had similar thoughts around how and when to, not want to say join the parties, but like interact with them.
Yeah, I honestly don't know much about it to the point that what I was typing out was it would be great for somebody from that group to come like I would be very like open to the idea of using one of these like meetings or at least part of the meetings for somebody from that group to present on what they are working on, even not even from a wanting to establish collaboration at that point for us to at least know what they are doing, where they're going, what's the format of the data, the goals. I think that would be helpful, at least to me, because I've known of them by name, but that's pretty much where my um knowledge of the group has stayed.
So is the group within chaos? And is it
Yes,
related to
yeah.
the URL you sent earlier, Sophia?
No, it's a different one. I'll send you
Okay,
Andrew's
okay,
link so you have full context.
okay, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Hi, sir.
Hello. Sorry I'm late, but I had to go see another mentee's talk. It was about security in Africa, and it did make me cry. It was a really good
Mm.
talk.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So
Um,
what are we covering?
we were just talking about the package like we've just kind of honestly been throwing around different topics of getting Sophie up to date of what we've worked on. We've talked about honestly just a bunch of random topics. The only thing that I was gonna kind of tee up that was on the agenda was a reference to a thread that Josh Burkus had opened this past week. Um, and it was like a discussions around what are some approaches for analyzing the pace of an individual contributor's like contributions. Was trying to figure out like trying to develop out, always bring up the thread on the screen if that's helpful for people. Even though he is not here necessarily, I told him that I would like kind of tee up the conversation in case people had ideas about like I'll just read the interesting analyzing the pace of individual contributors' contributions, that is on a smooth frequency basis, how often do they contribute? This frequently stats can be used for a number of community measurements purposes. However, I need an algorithm that gives me an adjusted spacing weighted for different contributions and smooths where it does not get thrown off like things like weekends and vacations. Pretty much she's like, while I can write something like this from scratch, I seems like there would already be an existent algorithm library somewhere that has this type of function. So I thought this was like an interesting topic, and it's kind of some of the discussions I'd like to see in like in the data science working group of okay, what out of their knowledge, people's knowledge of different algorithms, like does this use case, do people have anything that this matches that seems to be a good fit to model this type of activity? If people have any thoughts about it.
DTW, dynamic time warping.
Okay, dynamic time.
It's the
DTW.
coolest sounding,
Let's.
stupidest, simplest algorithm. But what it allows you to see, it's often used as an anti-fraud. So like in the early days of like seeing how someone types into forms to make sure it's them. That's
Interesting.
dynamic time warping, and it's very good for tracking human behavior against their own behavior over like a week, a month, a year.
Sweet. I just put that in the chat. If you have any like links or anything that I refer to, I don't know if you've ever
Yeah.
worked with Josh Burkus directly. He's on our like on in Red Hat's what's now called OSIPO, which is just our open or OSPO team working. He does mainly stuff in the CNC. He's deep in the CNCF land, but has a pretty deep data background. One of the original like people working on Postgres. So he kind of hops in and out with working on stuff, and always likes to bring in some interesting topics.
Yeah, Ernest is asking if it's my favorite algorithm of all because before I was willing to take on or am ever willing to take on someone for a data science mentee, I asked them to tell me what they would apply this algorithm to because it is my favorite. But yeah, I really think this might be a good use case because it's very good for tracking like individual behavior within a crowd, essentially. But you have to have the element of time. And so if you have timestamp, which we do in this case, then it's a very relevant algorithm. Plus, it's my favorite, so if it fails, that's fine, but it's always fun to play with. I did want to talk about, I haven't really gotten to digest the notes from it, but I just had a call on sort of like connecting about chaos to Jonathan Starr, who works with CHAOSS. So that's a open source foundation just working with like just scientific repositories.
Yeah.
So it was a good conversation because I was like, where do you get your money from? He's like, we just reached out to a bunch of people who made a lot of money with open source, but specifically in the ways where like a biochem lab uses a lot of open source, but they make billions, right? So they've got money to give away. Really interesting paradigm shifting. So I wanted to talk to him about the uh like sponsorship model and if it was something they'd be willing to adopt. He said he was curious. And he said his biggest concern with most data science projects is that they don't have very good like access to like resilient data storage is what he wants to work on, which I thought was really interesting. So it might be a little bit outside of the scope of chaos, but there's also going to be meetings around that space. So I think we should show up. I'm willing to show up and just say like, hey, there might be something to co-work here with. And they're a nice little nonprofit focused on open source.
Yeah, I would be, so I've talked to Jonathan Starr before. I would be very curious to know how this work does or doesn't connect to what he was doing like 2 years ago. Because I would be like, I'm like, is this a new? Because it's like vaguely similar. It's one of those, like, just being, I'm like, is this the same thing under a different name or is this something kind of related but like a whole different space? Because that would be a really helpful to like advise on where because he's been in this. I mean, like him, like kind of like all of us is like he's been in this realm for a while, and so I just don't know what if what this is in relationship to what he was doing 2 years ago would be helpful context.
I have no
Um,
idea. So I just called him
yeah,
to talk about this sponsorship thing, and today was the first time I've talked to him. So
yeah. Because he might have come to this working group actually and spoke before. I could be wrong. He's definitely come and spoken at a chaos working group that I was attending here before, and it would make the most sense that it would be this one, but that's not a full confirmation.
Well, yeah. I don't know. So I'm gonna see, I'm gonna just show up out of my own interest for Gadfly to the talks around like data resilience. Um,
Yes.
yeah, because we've got a few projects that might turn into large data projects, so gotta be careful.
Yeah. That it kind of ties in well to what we were some of the stuff that we were talking about before you had hopped on the call of how do we like we're now starting to gather some data sources. How do we make it to where there are consistent ones that people can use for different use cases? So this all fits in pretty well with what we were talking about before, because it is very interesting that the problems that we have in data science are still kind of the same ones that were 5 years ago, but people think that they have dramatically changed because like AI is a like because or LLMs are like the thing that everyone thinks about. So like, oh, I can just ask this question. So this means that all of the data problems are solved and handled. And it's like, no, that's not how that works.
Well, yeah, I don't know. For Gadfly, we have like triple backup for our data projects, and I've got a nice little server and I know exactly where it is, right? But that's a very different model
Yes.
from most people who have it sorely on their computer or on some platform that they can't guarantee. So,
Yeah.
but that's all right. But yeah, if anything interesting comes out of that, I'll come back here and just, hey, here's some advisements around these kinds of projects.
Yeah, that'd be great. Um, we have about 4 more minutes. I don't know if anybody has anything else that they would like to um tee up, talk about.
Yeah, I was going to ask Sal, what is the next plan for the Oscoscope migration? We had, I remember Kali open issue to asking that what feedback do we specifically needed from one, and I could not necessarily say this is what we needed you to review. To me, the current plan looks good, and I wanted to know what's the next step for us to move it to a new repo.
Yeah, I think what we should do is just jump on and like look at the code and repo tandem for about 45 minutes. And in that, the reason why this migration is a little bit complicated is when I tried to set up the new repo, I broke a bunch of the pipelines. Go me. So I need to think a little bit about parsing that out and just doing a merge that is not broken. So if we can get like 45 minutes this next week or so, we should be able to clear that up and then submit a final. That's good. I think
I
that's the next
mean,
step.
on the chaos board level, don't we need some approval too before we go open that repo?
I would imagine so, but just getting it to the final PR stage is fine. What we would need now, Callie, do you have any idea at this stage for just having a repo?
Adding a repo underneath, like that's like technically under a specific working group, I do not know. We're through the process that I think Adrian and I and others have been on, we're starting to realize like, okay, how should we actually like propose a question to the board where they can answer or respond to? So we're hoping maybe to get a better process for that long term. I'm actually not on the board. I don't want to. Sophia is, but so I actually don't know what that is. Whenever it's like, what is the difference between a repository that implies a project, like an actual project, or a repository that is like a sub portion of the data science working group? I think personally, I would want, if the intention is for this to like be a part of the data science working group, that would be integrated into the at least the domain, the title to be like this is a sub pro like this is under the data like we're working on this the data science working group, but it's under this repository for X, Y, and Z reason. I mean, up until like Augur had like five different like repositories in Chaos's org, and I don't really know if there was a formal process to requesting those or where of what we should do because I have the same question, and the answer I'm not surprised, Sophia, not from so great question.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do
I've
feel
just been
like Don
creating
just made
stuff.
that people just create them. I don't think that yeah, take that as how you want to. That is how it's has how it's been. I think in the long term, as in like in the next like 1 to 3 months, because there's now going to be like an infrastructure committee that I think some of these processes will be defined out. Um, the board is not like a private thing. Um,
I
it's not
think
a
it's just a
shadow board.
very loose open source organization filled with like half academics that struggle to make the calls. So I think what we should do in this case, I had a similar problem when I tried to set up the like AI ML working group, and like for whatever reason, Linux Foundation had lost the institutional memory of creating a working group. Wild. So it took us way longer than it should have. But in this case, what we should do is we have the opportunity to state to the board that we have, for now, a like R&D sub-repository under this working group, because specifically it's going to report to this working group. I think if it
Yeah.
becomes a higher domain repository, that implies there's a community and a separate meeting, but this is where that will report to. So I think that's fine. But when we propose that to them, I think we should within that say this is the steps that we went through and do it with the sponsorship in place, and say like this is the higher level of standard that we want to hold ourselves to when putting a repo into place. I would like that.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds great. 'Cause yeah, it's I would say that it's not that the board is like some private entity. It's actually more
No,
that
it's
it's been a
not.
it's just it's been a small community and because of recent events where somebody has I think taken advantage of the setup of the infrastructure within the community and has been very what is the right word? Retaliatory, that a lot of things have had to have a lot more thought and decision making that has not been necessary whenever in the entirety of chaos up until this point it's usually been like oh, Sal wants to make a repository for this use case in the working group, great, create the repository, and then the conversation ends. And I think that it's chaos should mature. So there's like that side of it. But also, yeah, but I can understand the perspective of being like, why is this board so elusive? And it's unfortunate that the current events have painted it that way, I'll be honest.
Yeah, but we can
Yeah,
get a little bit more information from them. Theoretically,
Yeah.
this group is a bunch of maintainers, and if we're looking for clarity on how we are being governed, especially if we want to establish repositories and projects, that's appropriate. So just reach
Yeah.
out to them. They're human beings. They're stressed human beings, but they have
Yes.
emails and they're on the Slack. So
I promise they're not scary. Again, and I'm not on the
so,
board.
yeah, yeah. So if you remember, we started thinking of putting Earthscope in a better structure because of while submitting for funding,
yeah,
especially for the SI, we identified that the way the repo was currently structured is not going to present us as a project that is ready. So that was why we started saying, okay, let's give it a name, let's put it into a structured environment. So we should factor that in as we try to approach the board to say, okay, we have a R&D project under the System Science Working Group, and we
yeah.
want to make
Well,
this formal.
yeah. So I think in order to be compliant to the LF, we have to do it in two phases. So what I want us to like, we should have this meeting and like make sure we've got a super polished R&D version. And in that, we're immediately reaching out to the board and saying, look, we want to raise this repository. What would the steps be? We're proposing there's a sponsorship model behind it. And then we push it to the next level if we can get there. But yeah, we won't just go steal the domain. We have to get everything. And this is my fault. I did this to this repository, but everything has to be like triple signed. That was my idea, and it's so irritating every time.
Like, oh
But leave
no,
it. It's
the
good
governance that
security.
I created.
Oh, good, good. Excellent,
But
because
at the very least, I think that by the time you go through, I think that this process will be a lot more defined out. Because I mean, there is multiple different things that are going on in chaos that is requiring like more formal, like how do we create a repository? What is the domain, like what is the trademarking and different processes that realistically people have been in chaos for a while there's a lot more people involved than it's still a small community, but there's a lot more people involved than there was 2 years ago. And so it used to just be like a couple of people just being like, okay, I'm just going to do this and I'm just going to do that. And then things get bigger and it's a sign of like success and traction. But then you don't have the process of like, okay, how do we put a new project? How do we donate? How do we do these things? And so it's growing pains that I think are a sign of the specific like this where it's like 2 years ago I would have been so and I still am like oh my gosh somebody else is wanting to define out a data science project with a new data set that I'm not involved with like directly at all. That would have been like a mind-blowing suggestion for me 2 years ago. Really like so I like to look at it, I don't know, I guess maybe more optimistically, positively, that struggling through these things, it's growth.
yeah, well, it's cyclic. There's
Mhm.
always things like this going around somewhere in some community, and most of it is just institutional memories. So we have a really cool chance at the maintainer class right now to have some like communication in making this process. And we can define what looks and feels good to us, what processes we want to put in place. And I think the governing board is going to be nothing but grateful for some guidance. So,
Speaking of, we have this call turns into the community call in 4 minutes. And so if people are around, I actually don't think this is a bad thing to bring up. And the community call of being like, okay, how do we formally go about requesting like an addition to a repository? While I don't know if we're gonna get like the formal answer then, I think that's a good thing to like keep down outside of even like the 6 people in this group. As I don't know if people have saw the announcement on now we're having an infrastructure committee, and so that's pretty seems pretty heavily in the domain of what does the infrastructure how does the infrastructure committee want to handle something like this and slash the board and figuring out an easier process so it doesn't have to be so hands-on for everyone.
I was just
okay.
gonna recommend that. So,
Yeah.
like, I
So
think
that's
like we
in 3 minutes.
in three
Yes.
minutes. It's mostly like
Okay.
I think that committee has been proposed, but I think the actual tasks and jurisdiction is a little bit yet to be defined. So I think
Yeah.
asking right now, would this be under the purview and scope for this committee? Is like, I think that's just a direct question we can just ask because it's going to be brought up on the next agenda. So we might as well get clarity on that.
Can I be incredibly lazy and ask someone to throw a link to that next call in this chat?
It is here. You don't have to move.
Oh God, yeah, that's my least favorite thing about chaos.
Really?
It-
Why?
I mean, it's the living room style and it's the way that Gadfly works, but like I don't like that there's like meetings in the living room style. I just want that to be
You
oh,
want
whoops, I
to
popped in. So, but okay.
So
So
this will just transition and it's also the same exact document. You just go to the community meeting portion of the document
that's true. That's true.
and then you can just add your agenda point in there.
It's
Um
not a bad process. Okay, well, in that case, I will jump on for 15 minutes of the next one, and then I shall end my day having made my case, but I must run to the restroom first. I'll be back.
okay, I am facilitating so I will put that first.
Oh, interesting. I'm happy Kali and Star will
Hi,
join
It's the
because
Callie
hi
show.
everyone.
Hello. Let me stop the recording and then restart it for um